Right, good afternoon friends. Today we will be seeing a chapter called as disaster and disaster management, sir. See, this is part of GS paper 3. Only one line of syllabus is given, disaster and disaster management. Right, sir. Now we'll understand this chapter, disaster, what is a disaster, and we'll also talk about how exactly disaster can be managed. You also have a very recent experience of facing a disaster, how exactly it is managed. I am talking about June 3rd, sir. Right. Now, few things we'll understand, sir. We'll make it things very, very simple. See, mains examination is not like prelims. Prelims is very difficult. You cannot predict. Right, sir. That's the reason it means we always say preliminary examination, be prepared for the worst. But mains, it is not the case. Predictability almost to some degree it works here. Right. How exactly we can predict? As I was saying, first and foremost, you understand the syllabus. Each and every word which is given in the syllabus, that has to be understood, sir. Now, already we have seen the comparison between prelims and mains. We said prelims, nobody knows what is the syllabus. At least mains, we know what exactly is the syllabus. Right. If that is the case, we'll try to differentiate two aspects that is given in the syllabus. One, it talks about disaster. Number two, it talks about disaster management. Right. If that is the case, first we'll be talking about what is a disaster, what are the different types of disaster that is almost classified in India. Right. We'll talk about the vulnerability mapping of such disasters in India. Number two, we'll be talking about the management of the same. Right, sir. How exactly a disaster can be managed. See, whenever I talk about managing a disaster, it is not exactly we are managing the disaster, but only thing is that we are trying to reduce the eventual casualties that can be almost resulted by a disaster. It is all about mitigation of a disaster. Right, sir. If that is the case, only two aspects we are interested in. One, we will know what is a disaster, what are the different types of disaster, which part of India is vulnerable to which type of disaster. This is part one. Part two, for all the types of disaster, we will be talking about the mitigation techniques and the practice. Right, sir. Right. This mitigation techniques, you call it as disaster management. Right. If this is my understanding of the syllabus, then let me also see the previous year's questions. Till 2015, at least one question used to be there from disaster management. Right, sir. If that is the case, 12.5 marks is guaranteed from this particular area, disaster and disaster management. After all, it will not take more than 1 day of preparation for this particular area, sir. But very interestingly, when I talk about the 2016, 4 questions has been asked, sir. Right. Not only 2016, even when I talk about 2017, again 2 questions were asked from disaster and disaster management. Right. Technically speaking, I am also including GS1 in it. There is a reason why I am also bringing GS1 in it. The reason is very simple. When I talk about general studies 1, there is one area called as geography. Very pathetic area, but still. When I talk about the third paragraph in geography, sir, it talks about very important geographical phenomena such as earthquake, tsunami, cyclone, volcanic activity, and etc. was also there, sir, if you remember. Right. Now, one thing I am reiterating there, when I talk about GS1, there also we were talking about disasters, but rather it is not a disaster, we were calling it as a geographical phenomena. Right, sir. And very pathetic situation in the sense it is not only students who are not understanding the syllabus, even the examiner who is setting the question paper, he is also not understanding the syllabus. Because surprisingly, we are talking about mitigation techniques in paper 1, which is completely out of context. But again, I am telling you, let us prepare for the worst case scenario. Right. There also, to some extent, we will talk about disasters. Right. Explicitly, 4 disaster or natural hazards are given. Apart from natural hazards, which is given, if at all, if you are justifying this word called as etc., this etc. is justified, or it will be justified by the topics what we will be taking today, sir. Right. Very quickly, if at all, if I am just going through the previous year's question paper, few things, it just gives an idea from where exactly the questions are being picked from. Or I put it this way, almost let us draw a boundary for disaster management, disaster and disaster management. Right. If my boundaries are well drawn after understanding the syllabus and previous year's question paper, 80% of the questions which comes in this particular area can be predicted. We'll just see what exactly is almost similar to all types of question which is being asked, sir. For example, when I talk about the 2013, how important or vulnerability risk assessment for pre-disaster management? As an administrator, what are the key areas that you focus in disaster management? It means directly the ingredients of disaster management is asked, right, sir? Only to motivate you, they are asked, means at least they are just giving you a situation that if you are an administrator, right, sir? Otherwise, the answer to this question is directly the essence what is given in disaster management, right, sir? Now, when I talk about 2014 question, drought has been recognized. Only just very recently, just before 2014, drought was recognized as a disaster, right, sir? If that is the case, it has more current affairs orientation. Drought has been recognized as a disaster in view of its party, expense, temporal duration, slow onset, etc., 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 right, sir? With focus on September 2010 guidelines, right, from National Disaster Management Authority, discuss the mechanism for preparedness. Right, sir. If that is the case, one agency they are asking, that agency what they are asking is NDMA, sir. National Disaster Management Authority, and the guidelines what is given by NDMA for mitigating the same. Preparedness, right, it is nothing but the pre-phase or the pre-impact phase what you are prepared to face a disaster. Right, sir. If that is the case, one agency which has to be focused here is NDMA, sir. Right. 2015 question, if I talk about 2015 question, again, frequency of earthquake appears to have increased in Indian subcontinent. However, India's preparedness for mitigating their impact has significant gaps. Right, discuss various aspects. Fine, sir. Again, 2016, if at all, if I'm just talking about, Himalayas are highly prone to landslide. This is a statement, and the question says, discuss the causes and suggest suitable measure to mitigate. Right, sir. Second question, major cities in India is becoming more vulnerable to flood condition. Discuss. Right, sir. GS3, when I talk about GS3, the frequency of urban flood due to high intensity rainfall is increasing over the years. Discuss the reason for urban flood, highlight the mechanism for preparedness and to reduce the risk during such events. Right, sir. Again, when I talk about the GS3, with reference to NDMA guidelines, discuss the measure to be adopted to mitigate the impact of recent incidents of cloudburst in many places. Right. Even 2017 I am not discussing. See, one pattern I see. What is the pattern? They ask about a disaster, at least they say that this particular area is prone to disaster, but the place where they concentrate is only two, sir. One, they talk about mitigation. They talk about mitigation. And very importantly, they are talking about that mitigation which is part of NDMA's dictates, sir. If that is the case, we'll make it very simple. Only few areas we'll concentrate. We'll talk about disaster. Number two, we'll talk about the preparedness. Other way of saying the same, I am talking about the mitigation practice. If I couple both preparedness and mitigation together, I very popularly called as disaster management. Right, sir. Every disaster has some SOPs, standard operating procedure for mitigating the effect of it. Right, sir. Each and every disaster, we just take it. And very importantly, the most important factor what you need to, or at least what you should have to answer the question is common sense, sir. Right. We'll just brainstorm it. We'll see whether that aspect is present here or not. Right, sir. That also we'll see. Right, sir. If that is the case, let me reiterate, only two things are repeatedly being asked in the examination. One, the mitigation techniques and the organization called as NDMA and the guidelines which is given by NDMA. Right. Even when I talk about 2017, at least I have a similar type of questions which is being asked. Right, sir. They asked about tsunami. Describe the mechanism for preparedness and to reduce the risk. Reduce the risk is nothing but mitigation. Right, sir. If that is the case, again and again, only one type of question is repeatedly being asked. That is mitigation. Right, sir. Post understanding the scenario, now we'll go step by step. We'll understand what is a disaster, what are the different types of disaster, where all we have the vulnerability of disaster. Right. Interestingly, there is no place in India which is free from disaster. Right, sir. After understanding it, we'll also talk about disaster management and some SOPs which can be adopted for all type of disaster and its mitigation. Right. We'll go step by step. If I talk about a disaster as such, because syllabus says disaster and disaster management. When I talk about disaster, what is a disaster? Put it in simple terms. All these are words just for having a sake of PPT. I am just having it. Right. Essence is very, very simple. What is a disaster? Any unforeseen event, right, which can result in loss of men and material, you call it as a disaster. If that is the case, two essence are there, sir. One, it is unexpected, or let me call it as sudden. Sometimes every disaster is not unexpected, it is expected also. But still, when I talk about the layman's understanding of disaster, it is an unforeseen event. Right. It is not just an unforeseen event, but this unforeseen event has the ability to lose or at least cause the loss of men and material. Right. It can bring the destruction of property. It can result in casualties also. This is the simple understanding. Right. If that is the case in your own terms, okay, fine. You can take it as a definition of a disaster. Any unforeseen event, either natural, any unforeseen event caused either by natural or man-made activity, which can induce loss of material or men or both, is called as a disaster. Right, sir. What is a disaster? We have an understanding. Unexpected, accident. Right. It can be natural as well as man-made. If at all, if it has the potential to lose or at least to make the loss of men and material, we call it as a disaster. Right. There are different types of disaster worldwide. Leave it. What we are interested is only those disaster which is described by NDMA, sir. NDMA. And somewhere, if at all, if I want one reference material for this particular area, order of preference, first is NDMA site, sir. Right, sir, very beautiful first page. Right. So this is a one-stop solution for all types of disaster that is recognized in India. If at all, if you are there in the left hand side of this web page, it means almost all the recognized disasters are mentioned here, sir. Right. Natural disaster and man-made disasters are also mentioned here. Right, sir. If that is the case, only these areas we are going to talk about, nothing else. Unless and until it is there in current affairs, we are not going to touch that particular area. Right. If that is the case, the number of topics what we are preparing is very, very limited. I'm telling you, these are the only topics what we are going to prepare. Right, sir. Apart from NDMA site, if at all, if you are not still satisfied with one site, one more site also I can give you. This is Vikaspedia with regard to disaster management. Only with the disaster and disaster management. And finally, the OAA material itself is sufficient. Only thing is that it is not covering the current affairs part of it. Otherwise, static portion OAA material is fine enough. Now, talking about the different types of disaster. Well, taking the definition itself, we said that it is unforeseen event, either caused by natural or man-made activity. If that is the case, I have what is very, very common is natural disaster. Otherwise, we call it as a natural hazards also sometimes. Right, sir. One, I have natural. Just to tell you that nowadays man is equally competing with nature, and he says that I can also contribute to this disaster. Such disaster we call it as man-made disasters, sir. Technically it is also called as anthropogenic disasters. Again I am telling you, these are the only types of disaster that is recognized in India. Right, when I talk about a natural disaster, earthquake, flood, landslide, cyclone, tsunami, urban flood, a very new concept which was very recently added. Urban flood is also added, heat wave, and very recently drought is also added. Right, sir. These are the types of disaster that is being recognized by NDMA. And the recognized disaster by mankind, very popularly it is called as CBRN disasters. Chemical, biological, radiological and nuclear disasters. Very popularly it is called as CBRN disasters. These are man-made disasters. Now one by one we will take it. What is what will not go into detail. Only thing is that vulnerability mapping will take it in detail. Vulnerability mapping in the sense which area in India is prone to a particular type of disaster, we call it as vulnerability mapping, sir. If vulnerability mapping is not done, certainly speaking, disaster management, particularly preparedness phase, cannot be followed as such. Right, sir. One by one we will take it. Right, sir. Holistically speaking, when I talk about the degree of disaster that India is prone to, almost all types of disaster are prevalent in India. Right, one thing you can keep it in mind, volcanic activity or volcano is not regarded as a disaster in India. Elsewhere, entire world, volcanic episodes are regarded as disaster. In India, it is not regarded as a disaster. Reason is very simple. Right, it is a geographical phenomena. We do have volcanoes in India, but they do not induce this aspect called as disaster. Because when I talk about disaster, what is the definition of disaster says? When I talk about unforeseen event, right, which can cause damage to life or material, right, sir, they are completely isolated. Unless and until you go and disturb it, it will not disturb you. Right, sir. If that is the case, volcano is not regarded as a disaster in India. Right. Now, approximately when I talk about each and every disaster and the degree to which India is affected or prone to, this is a complete picture of it, sir. This is a complete picture of it. Right. Only the natural disasters, we'll just take it. One by one, we'll just take it. Right, sir. Now, when I talk about disaster in India, statistics says near about 60%, sir. Near about 60% of Indian landmass is prone to earthquake. It's prone to earthquake. If that is the case, only one thing you can take it, forget about these percentage. Right, sir. Almost we are phobic to numbers. Only one thing we'll remember, majority of Indian land is prone to earthquake. That way we'll just remember. Right. Now slightly deviating from the fact. Now when I talk about earthquakes, sir. Right, sir. Now when I talk about earthquake, already we know few aspects of earthquake. What is an earthquake? Where exactly earthquakes are normally confined to? That also we know. Now when I talk about the locational aspect of earthquake, one thing we know for sure, everywhere there is a possibility of having an earthquake. If nature is not resulting in an earthquake, man-made activity can also result in earthquake. But even if that is the case, when I talk about the natural hazards and the resultant earthquake, right, sir, where exactly earthquakes are very normally confined to? They are confined to the plate boundaries, sir. If that is the case, I know, right, whenever this Indo-Austral plate is adjoining, means at least confluencing or converging with the Eurasian plate, this is the place where it is normally prone to earthquake, right, sir. Now, I said 60%, somewhere around 58%, okay, fine, make it simple. I said 60%, more simple, majority. More than majority, right, sir. Now, what is majority? Nobody knows, staying in Tamil Nadu, right. Now, when I talk about the majority area, right, we have different areas which is divided into different zones, sir. Different zones, at least earlier, past, accidentally if you remember, sir, Zone 1 to zone 5, we have divided the entire Indian landmass. What is this zone 5? That region which is highly prone to earthquake. Right, very high damage risk zone, we call it as a zone 5. Zone 4, high damage risk zone, and zone 3, moderate damage risk zone. So whenever I talk about the area which is almost prone to earthquake, it is zone 5 along with zone 4. Along with zone 4 and zone 3 is taken, sir. So when I talk about the place which is affected or it is prone to earthquake, it is not only zone 5, it is zone 5, 4 and 3. See, every area cannot be remembered, but at least zone 5 can be remembered, right? Even when I talk about zone 5, each and every state, almost it is very difficult to remember, but one thing I can remember, right? It means one thing what is very, very common to all those zone 5 is almost 7 zone 5s are there, sir. Apart means among the 7 zone 5 areas, what is very, very common in this zone 5 area is fold mountains. If you want to qualify it, we call it as young fold mountain. If you remember, there was one question which was asked in the past. They say Himalayas are highly prone to earthquake. I understand, but there is nothing but a young fold mountain which is highly prone to earthquake, right? Remembering all regions is not needed. Only few areas of zone 5, if you remember, that is more than enough. Only one thing you remember, either it is fold mountains or Himalayas. Not only Himalayas, Himalayas along with Andaman and Nicobar Islands. One more area is also there, very recently discovered. Right, we have one place in Bhuj. Geographical time scale, very, very recent. Right, sir. Gujarat I am talking about. Right, sir. I am not going into details because each and everything going in detail is not needed here. That is the reason I am just superficially, I am just saying it is Himalayas and Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Right, sir. Now, vulnerability mapping of an earthquake we know. Which are the areas in India which is prone to earthquake? At least we have an idea. Right. The confluence of the idea says it is just wherever we have young fold mountain, there all will be having the, at least that area is highly prone to earthquake. Right, sir. Right. Similarly, when I talk about the flood, sir, when I talk about flood, a situation called as flood. Right, sir. Right, sir. I am talking about a situation called as flood. Right, only vulnerability mapping, we'll just do it again. The second step, we'll take the individual disaster. We'll also talk about disaster, how exactly this disaster is resulted, and what are the mitigation techniques. Now, when I talk about flood, what is a flood, sir? What is a flood? Technically speaking, flood is nothing but the overflow of water beyond the natural levee. If you remember, I don't know whether we have discussed or not, we talked about a physical feature called as floodplain, sir. We would have talked about a physical feature called as a floodplain. See, if I talk about a floodplain, right, this region I call it as a floodplain. We have a river, say the channel, and again beyond the channel, again I have a floodplain. Right, the elevated area of a floodplain, we call it as a bluff. Now, what do I understand when I call a region as a floodplain? Majority, right, of the plains. For example, when I talk about Gangetic Plain, this Gangetic Plain are nothing but flood plains. What do I understand when I call a region as a flood plain? This plain is essentially almost resulted by a mechanism called as flood. Flood is a mechanism which has resulted in making this place as a plain. What is a plain? Featureless lowland, flat land, we call it as a plain. If this is my understanding, right, what is a flood then? Can I say, if at all, if the river water enters the flood plains, I call it as a flood. The boundaries of any rivers, the boundaries of any rivers, it is called as a levee. Levee can be artificial or levee can be natural also. Most of the time levees are natural. Strengthening the levee, right, we also go for artificial levees. Levees are nothing but the boundaries or the banks of the river. When water overflows beyond this levee, this situation we call it as a flood. If that is the case, technically speaking, you can have the definition of a flood. The overflow of river water, beyond the natural levee, is called as flood. Layman's understanding, river entering floodplains, you call it as flood, right, nothing beyond it. And understanding says flood may happen even that local areas, even if this local area do not experience precipitation, then also flood can happen. Because I understand almost upper riparian places may have high precipitation and lower riparian places may have this phenomena called as flood, right sir? Now what is a flood? We have an idea. Water entering the river plains or flood plains, you call it as a flood. Now when I talk about the vulnerability mapping, sir, when I talk about the vulnerability mapping, it says 12% of Indian landmass is affected by floods, sir. 12% of Indian landmass. Converting into hectares, 40 million hectares roughly is prone to floods. Right, sir. Vulnerability mapping says 40 million hectares or 12% of the complete landmass is prone to flood. Now, what is a flood? To what extent flood is affecting this country, we know. Now, when I talk about the area and the temporal dimension, both time and space, when I talk about area which is generally affected by flood, sir, right, almost every river is known for its flooding mechanism. Put it very simple, wherever you have a plain, right, there all we have the probability of having a flood. Why I say so is very, very simple, because this plain itself is created by the mechanism called as a flood, sir, right. But still, when I talk about that area which is highly prone to flood, right, sir, any idea? One, it is Assam plains or Brahmaputra plains, sir. Brahmaputra plains, already this scenario we have discussed in the earlier class. Right, why exactly Brahmaputra plains? Why Brahmaputra plains? Precipitation is also high and the riverine, almost the water carried by the river is also high. Right, sir. Or I put it this way, melt of glacier plus the precipitation, both are high with respect to Brahmaputra plains. Right, sir. Complete Assam is prone to flood. Apart from Assam, Gangetic plain, put it very simple. Gangetic plain. Right, sir. Somebody said Bihar accepted because there is one river we always say that it is a sort of Bihar. Right, sir. I am talking about river Kosi. Right. Almost it is known for its recurrent flooding nature. Right, sir. These are the two places which floods to the maximum degree. I'm not denying that other places are not flooding, but when I talk about the regions where the maximum flood happens, these are the two regions that has to be noted. Right, sir. Now, when I talk about the time of flood, sir, entire India, when I talk about time of flood, almost it is July and August, you have the maximum flood, sir. June also we have some degree of flood, but July every day you will be seeing in newspaper that some part of India is being flooded. August, when I talk about August, again, majority of the part means northern plains and the Brahmaputra plains will be flooded. Right. Again, reason is very simple. This is the time which almost overlaps with the southwest monsoon. See why this period? That also we have explained in the earlier classes, but again reiterating. The reason for having the flood during this particular season, precipitation is also very high, sir. Precipitation is also very high. With precipitation, ablation is also very high. Melt of glaciers. Both are very, very high. Precipitation is brought by southwest monsoon. And when I talk about melt of glacier, what is the season? In general, it is summers. If that is the case, melt of glaciers is also high. Right, sir. Both way, the river is being added with water. Right, sir. Whenever I talk about July and August, I am talking about the national average. I am not talking about a particular state. Right. If I am talking about a particular state, if I am confining my study only to Tamil Nadu, then the temporal study says it is in the month of December. Because I understand entire India goes with southwest monsoon. Right. Tamil Nadu, it almost receives maximum from northeastern monsoon. Completely there is a change of wind and season is also different. Right, sir. I am talking only about the national average. Right. To disaster, we have taken the vulnerability mapping. At least we have an idea where these disasters are confined to. Right, sir. And thirdly, when I talk about cyclones, first cyclones, then we'll talk about tsunami. What is a cyclone? We have an idea. Right, intense low pressure, not just low pressure, intense low pressure, you call it as a cyclone. Right, sir. Now, if that is the case, all coastal states in India is vulnerable to cyclone. There is no exception. Right, sir. But still, when I talk about the east coast versus the west coast, right, so far the statistics says, right, it is the eastern coast is highly vulnerable to cyclone. Reason? The warm nature of Bay of Bengal, sir. The average temperature of sea water or surface water in Bay of Bengal is marginally higher than Arabian Sea. If that is the case, number of cyclone in Bay of Bengal will be considerably higher than Arabian Sea. Right, statistics says every one, when I talk about Arabian Sea versus Bay of Bengal, right, every one cyclone in Arabian Sea will have 3 cyclones in Bay of Bengal. Right, it is statistics. Right, but when I talk about the current scenario, it is completely different. Completely different. Number of cyclones or number of deep depressions in Arabian Sea is comparatively more than Bay of Bengal. Right, sir. Now we are going for one more reason, and very recently we have brought one more reason. They say reason, why? You ask why, because very easily we can ask only one question. Right, it is why. Even if I say what is my name, they ask you why. Right, sir. But still, answering this question why, they say it is because of a phenomena called as Modaki. Hope so another why is not asked. Right, what is El Nino Modaki? Let us not go into detail of it. Right, sir. Now things are changing, sir. Just to tell you, abnormality or not normal, whether behaving abnormally or not normal is new normal in weather mechanism. Right, sir. Completely a deviant behavior in weather mechanism. Today we call it as a new normal. It means abnormality, we are calling it as a new normal. Right. Fine, sir. But still, keeping all these stuffs away, when I talk about cyclones, both Arabian Sea and Bay of Bengal is prone to cyclone, but still I say, going by statistics, past records, the number of cyclones in Bay of Bengal is comparatively higher than Arabian Sea. Right, sir. If at all, if I am there in Arabian Sea, one region which is highly prone to cyclone in Arabian Sea is Gujarat, sir. Any reason why? This is the place where you have two Gulf region. More an area is surrounded by land, right? The water temperature will be very high, and certainly speaking, the avenue of cyclone will be also high. Right, sir. When I talk about Arabian Sea or the west coast, the most, or I put it this way, highly vulnerable state is state of Gujarat. Reason, we have the presence of two Gulf. One is Gulf of Kutch and two is Gulf of Khambat. When I talk about the Bay of Bengal, all four states are equally vulnerable with cyclones. Lakshadweep and Andaman is also known for its cyclone prone nature. To conclude, all littoral states in India, all states with a coastline is vulnerable to cyclones. 9 states along with the 2 union territories, okay, even union territory means like Puducherry, Dayu and Daman is also vulnerable to cyclone. Apart from it, Andaman and Lakshadweep is also known for its cyclone. Put it very simple, all littoral states, all states and union territory with a coastline is prone to cyclone in India. Right, sir. Now, if I know the place where cyclone generally strikes India, let me also talk about another phenomena, the byproduct of earthquake, we call it as a tsunami. What is a tsunami? We have an understanding, seismic sea wave or an harbor wave, we call it as a tsunami. Right, mechanism of tsunami is explained, right. We'll just understand which coast is normally vulnerable to tsunami. Again, I'm telling you, right, we have west coast versus east coast. If that is the case, let me talk about Arabian Sea versus Bay of Bengal. Right, here I have a difference. Among these two coasts, west versus east, which is vulnerable to tsunami? It is east coast, sir. Because my understanding says, right, east coast is the one where it is very, very near to a convergent boundary. It is very, very near to a convergent boundary. Right, sir. Now, when I talk about tsunami, I just compared Arabian Sea versus Bay of Bengal. Right, two types of boundary generally we come across, at least we find it in ocean, sir. When I talk about ocean, the two types of boundary in ocean, what are the two types of boundary in ocean? One, you have convergent, and two, you have divergent, sir. Right, we call it as ocean convergence and ocean divergence. Right. When I talk about plate tectonic theory, the idea says the divergent boundary along the oceanic crust is not vulnerable to tsunami. Right. Whereas a convergent boundary in oceanic crust is highly vulnerable to tsunami. If that is the case, Bay of Bengal, you have one such convergent boundary. Arabian Sea, what I have, or the extension of Indian Ocean, what I have is a divergent boundary. Right, sir. Bay of Bengal, we have a convergent boundary, whereas Arabian Sea, what we have is only a divergent boundary. Idea says only the east coast is vulnerable to tsunami, not the west coast. Kerala is affected in the year 2004, December 26th. But just to tell you that it is not the direct coast is not struck directly, but it is the indirect effect where Kerala was affected. Right, sir. Now, if that is the case, when I talk about tsunami, tsunami is prone to few states, that is complete east coast plus Andaman and Nicobar Islands. This is the place which is generally prone to tsunami. I am not denying Kerala, just explaining the scenario that Kerala is not affected directly. Right, sir. Now, cyclones, we know where exactly cyclones strike Indian coast. With that, we also talked about tsunami. Right, not entire coastline of India is vulnerable to tsunami, but at least majorly it is the east coast of India which is vulnerable to tsunami. Right, sir. And furthermore, coming to a disaster called as drought. Technically, we'll understand what is a drought. Right. Later, when we are discussing detailed about drought, we'll understand what is a drought. Right, sir. Now, when I talk about the drought, 68% of cultivable area is almost prone to drought. Or again, I am putting you, it means more than 2/3 of this country is vulnerable to drought. Right, sir. Further, when I talk about another disaster, right, we'll talk about landslide first, then we'll talk about avalanche. When I talk about landslide, see, avalanche, technically speaking, avalanche is also a kind of a landslide. What is an avalanche? The same process which happens with respect to snow, we call it as avalanches. Right, sir. Even you would have studied about a concept called as lahar associated with the volcano. That is also a landslide. Right, sir. If that is the case, we'll have a technical definition of a landslide and we can move further. Fine. The gravity shift, or I put it this way, mass wasting, within bracket, you can write it as gravity shift. Mass wasting of weathered material along the slopes of a mountain, is called as landslide. So understanding says wherever you have a weathered material, right, detached rock which is there in the mountain itself, in situ breakage of rock, you call it as a weathering. Right, that rock, almost if at all, if I have a mountain, if this rock get detached from the parent rock, you call it as a weathered material. What is mass wasting? Gravity shift. If at all if this weathered material is moving along the effect of gravity, with respect to the effect of gravity, you call it as a mass wasting or gravity shift. So I understand. Gravity shift or mass wasting of weathered material along the slopes of the mountain, we call it as a landslide. This is the understanding. Now, wherever you have a mountain, there all landslide is possible. But still, When I talk about landslide to the degree of disaster, there are two places, sir. One, default name. It comes in the name of Himalayas, sir. It comes in the name of Himalayas. Himalayas is highly prone to landslide. Right. Second, only place where landslide happens to the degree of disaster is, it is not Western Ghats, rather it is western side of Western Ghats. Western Ghats, yes, you are right, no denial, but when I talk about degree of disaster, it is not entire Western Ghats, it is only the western side of Western Ghats. What is so common with both these mountains? Steep slopes are very good. Technically, you call them as escarpments, or you call it as very steep slopes. Reason for this escarpment formation is different. Himalayas, the reason for its very steep slope is intense folding, sir. Intense folding is the reason why at least we have this phenomena happens. Right. When I talk about the western side of Western Ghats, the reason is epirogenesis, or you call it as a subsidence of the land. Right. This is not needed, but at least I should know that it means it is known for its escarpments or very steep slopes. Right, sir. Now, to have a landslide to the degree of disaster, escarpments is very much needed. But the thing what triggers a landslide may be different from each other. When I talk about Himalayas, what is the triggering element of this landslide? At least I have two reasons. One, during monsoons, you have heavy precipitation. Very high precipitation. Sometimes it is also referred as a cloud burst. Cloud burst, there is no authenticated definition we have, but still, when I talk about the different research paper and a data which is given in the research paper, it says, so any place receives more than 7.5 centimeters or 75 millimeter of rain within 1 hour. Within 1 hour, you call it as a cloud burst. Heavy precipitation within a very small time. Right. Few data says it is 10 centimeters, but still, most widely accepted fact is more than 7.5 centimeter or 75 millimeter in less than 1 hour. Less than 1 hour, we call it as a cloud burst. So what triggers landslide in Himalayas is this heavy precipitation. Particularly when I talk about the southern slopes of Himalayas, it is triggered by heavy precipitation. Right. Northern slopes, we do not have heavy precipitation because it is the leeward side. Right. But still, I have another mechanism which may trigger this landslide. This we call it as earthquakes. That is the case, a place which may experience earthquake. Right. It can also have one more disaster which follows, that you call it as a landslide. And I know the fact that Himalayas is highly prone to earthquake also. Right, sir. Now, Himalayas, at least two triggering factors we have. Right. When I talk about the western side of Western Ghats, what is the triggering element in it? It is only high precipitation. Because I know this is the place. When I talk about western side of Western Ghats, this is a place which is known for its far moist climatic conditions. Only two wettest location or wet location in mainland India, one northeastern states, the second only place is western side of Western Ghats. Right. Now again consolidating, Himalayas, there can be two reasons which can act as the triggering element for landslide. One, as I was saying, very high precipitation including cloud burst. Along with the cloud burst, you can also include earthquake in it. Right, sir. When I talk about the western side of Western Ghats, it is only the high precipitation. Right. Again, one more thing which can be added common to both, that is anthropogenic activities. Be it Himalayas or western side of Western Ghats, both can trigger landslide. Anthropogenic activity means man-made activity. Right, sir. Now, some of the vulnerability analysis or that area, equal to it means vulnerability analysis or vulnerability mapping. Right, sir. Almost some of the very common disasters in India, at least we have taken where what kind of a disaster may strike, sir. Right. We said almost majority of India is prone to earthquake. Right, at least 12% of Indian landmass is prone to flood. Entire coastal region is prone to cyclones. East coast, particularly those states which is having the coastline with Bay of Bengal, is highly prone to tsunamis. Apart from that, when I talk about landslide, Himalayas and western side of Western Ghats, we have taken that it is highly prone to Himalayas. When I talk about avalanche, right, understanding says it can be only Himalayas because that is the only place where we have the snow covers as such. Right. These are some of the means vulnerability analysis map, and we also said that it means somewhere around 2/3 of means at least the cultivable land in India is prone to drought. Right, sir. Now this is the vulnerability mapping of the complete disaster in India. Where what disaster? With this, what we'll do, we'll just take individual disaster. We'll talk about the disaster management, how exactly a disaster can be managed, and so on, sir. To add a point completely, this can be taken from the PPTs, what can be means, what will be given to you later. Right, sir. Now with all these things, what adds salt to the existing wounds? Right, changing demographics and socio-economic condition, unplanned urbanization, and all the negative aspects, whatever you feel that it is a negative aspect, always one thing is there, sir. Right, always use this word, right, sir, climate change, global warming, etc. All these adds to the degree of disaster more, sir. Already we have disasters. When I talk about the vulnerability of disaster, it adds more vulnerable, or at least that more degree is added more by these things as well, sir. Right. Now, before talking about each and every disaster and disaster management, we'll just talk about what exactly is disaster management. What are the different steps in disaster management and how exactly these steps can be implemented in each and every specific disaster related concepts as such. Right, sir. Now, taking the definition of disaster management. Definition says so. Disaster management is an effort to inquire into the process of hazard turning to a disaster and identifying its cause and rectifying the same through public policy. Therefore, disaster management is a policy issue concerned with minimizing and preventing the damage impact of natural or man-made hazard. Put it very simple. When I talk about disaster management, right, two types of disasters are there, sir. What are they? Either it is man-made or natural. Natural, you cannot prevent it. Earthquake, you cannot prevent it. Right, sir. But one thing I can do it, I can mitigate it. What is this mitigation? Right, you can reduce the eventual effect of an earthquake. Right, sir. If that is the case, if I understand what is disaster, disaster management is very simple. If it is man-made disaster, we can prevent it. If it is not man-made disaster, at least we can mitigate it. Right, sir. If that is the case, when I talk about disaster management, this is a conscious steps taken in order to prevent a man-made disaster or to mitigate the effect of a natural disaster. This definition you can write it if you want. Disaster management is a conscious effort, aimed at preventing a disaster, comma, if it is natural, if it is man-made, or mitigating the eventual effects of a natural disaster. Right, sir. If that is the case, my understanding says, what is disaster management? Right, I am taking some steps. If at all, just following these steps, I may prevent a man-made disaster. If not, at least I can mitigate the natural disaster. What is mitigation? Again, I am telling you, the reducing the eventual casualties, effect of the disaster, you call it as mitigation. Right, sir. We also have an act, Disaster Management Act or National Disaster Management Act, which was enacted in the year 2005. According to this National Disaster Management Act, it defines what exactly is disaster management, and it has given 7-step disaster management practices. Almost this is a cyclical practices what we have. We'll see one by one what exactly it is. Right, so according to the definition, it says disaster management is a continuous cycle and integrated process of planning, organizing, coordinating, and implementing measures which are necessary to expedite for these 7 activities. What are they? 1, you prevent a disaster. Right, sir. First and foremost, disaster management says try preventing it, and we know that the prevention can be done only if it is a man-made. Right. If not, at least mitigate it. What is mitigation? Reducing the risk of any disaster and reducing the severity of this disaster. Right, sir. The second step in the disaster management is mitigation. The third step, they call it as integrated one. They call it as capacity building. Capacity building. Right, sir. Post having these 3 steps, fourth, the consolidated one again, right, coming together, almost we say that we are ready to face any disaster. Right, sir. It is the stage of preparation or preparedness. These are the 8 steps what we have, almost cyclic in nature. Just to tell you that 4 steps talking about the pre-impact phase or pre-disaster phase, and final 4 talks about post-disaster phase. If that is the case, this is the place where almost post saying that you are prepared to face a disaster, right? Disaster strikes, you call it as an impact phase. Right, post-impact, when I talk about the management as such, immediately after the impact phase, there will be a almost quick response or prompt response to answer that call of disaster. Immediately after responding to the call of disaster, you will be assessing the severity of the magnitude of the disaster. You call it as assessment phase. Post assessing the magnitude of a disaster, you may almost employ evacuation, rescue, relief operations, etc. And finally, rehabilitation and reconstruction. These are the 8 steps which is determined by Disaster Management Act of 2005. And these are the continuous steps or cyclical steps which has to be followed in disaster management activities as such. Prevention, mitigation, capacity building, preparedness, your quick response, assessment, rescue, and finally rehabilitation. Now, all these 8 steps are common to all types of disaster. Right, sir. The same process, if at all, if I am just understanding diagrammatically. As I said, this is a cyclical process, sir. I said it's a cyclical process. You try to prevent it if it is a man-made disaster. If it is natural, at least we'll try to mitigate it. Right, sir. If that is the case, we say that we are completely prepared, and whenever I talk about prepared, it means completely the capacity building phase is almost done. Right, sir. Once you are completely prepared, then comes June 3rd, 2018, sir. Right. Disaster. Right. Most of you are in this phase. Rehabilitation phase. Okay. Whatever it is. Right. Right, sir. Just to tell you, it means entire disaster management can be divided into 3 phases, sir. One, as I was saying, it is called as pre-impact phase. Pre-impact phase. The complete phase, you call it as a pre-impact phase. Number 2, the impact itself, what you call it as a disaster. And number 3, you call it as a post-impact phase. What you will do after the impact or the disaster strikes a particular place. Right, sir. As I was saying, that means immediately after the impact, what is need is a quick response. Very quick response or a very prompt response. Right, sir. Post answering the call of a disaster, then you have a very important area, what you call it as an assessment. What is this assessment? What can be this assessment? Assessment is not about measuring the loss. Assessment is all about understanding the magnitude of a disaster. Right, sir. Without assessing the magnitude or the severity of a disaster, response cannot be so successful, sir. That is the case. This assessment is assessment of the disaster itself in severity and magnitude, not in terms of property and life at this moment. Right, sir. Post assessment, you have the phase of rescue, relief, etc., or what you call as evacuation, and finally the last stage we have in the name of reconstruction and rehabilitation. Right, sir. Post reconstruction and rehabilitation, again you are entering this phase, because you know next year also the same disaster happens on not June 2nd, but it is on June 2nd next year. Right, sir. Only thing is that disaster is a continuous process. Right, with rehabilitation and reconstruction, right, your preparedness for disaster is not ending there, sir. Right. This is the complete map or the diagrammatic representation of disaster management. Right. Now, when it comes to answer writing in the question papers, or at least answer writing in the examination, right, we'll follow the same SOPs, sir. Right. One, we'll be talking about those things which has to be followed in pre-impact phase. Right. And we'll also talk about those things which has to be followed in post-impact phase. If your preparedness in pre-impact phase is very, very high, or it means if at all if you are well prepared, right, rehabilitation and reconstruction needs very less energy that has to be spent. Right. Again, I'm telling you, like geography, this is also an area where compensation is almost applied. Right, sir. More you invest here, pre-prepared phase or pre-impact phase, right, post-impact phase or the eventual casualties will be very, very less. Right. These 8 areas, whichever type of disaster is being asked, these names, these words can be added there, right sir. This also gives you a weightage, right. Now understanding what is a disaster management and some of the stages which is there in disaster management, right sir. Now we'll talk about issue specific disaster and disaster management, sir. Issue specific, right. Again going back to the same things, not spending more time here, but again only the very basic ideas. We started with earthquake almost. Right sir, we started with earthquake. Right sir. Now one thing we know, what is an earthquake we know. Where all in India is vulnerable to earthquake, that also we know. Where all? Right sir, majority. That is the easy way of saying. But still we know that Himalayas is highly prone to earthquake. Now, most of the questions what is asked in the examination, reiterating, either they ask about the preparedness, right. Other way of asking about preparedness, they say mitigation. What is mitigation? Reducing the effect. Right. Whenever I talk about reducing the effect, when reduction of effect comes into reality, only if you are prepared. If that is the case, preparedness and mitigation, I am not separating it, I am just taking it as one component, sir. If that is the case, we'll discuss, we'll brainstorm, right, two things, right. Pre-impact phase of earthquake and post-impact phase of earthquake. Impact phase, nobody can say anything, right sir, because time is so less, right, you cannot even react by the time when earthquake actually strikes you, right sir. Now, when I talk about the pre-impact phase, right, what is very important here, which is not so common, I call it as common sense, right sir. If that is the case, when I talk about pre-impact phase, right, what are the different steps, measures? There is completely, it can be open-ended, right, no boundaries for it, only thing is that it should be logical. Right, so what are the different things what we can almost employ in pre-impact phase of earthquakes? Sir, we'll brainstorm for one or two, then we'll leave for the rest. Okay, to motivate you, if you are an administrator of a place which is prone to earthquake, what you will do apart from applying for a transfer? Right, what exactly you do, sir? Right, what are the pre-impact phase or what are the measures you will take to mitigate the effects of an earthquake? Completely I am telling you, it means structure is not needed, nothing is there. GS, nothing is there, sir. Nothing is needed, only points you need. Right. Whatever is the way of arrangement, it is immaterial. What you need is only fact and almost the points. Come on, sir, help me out. Okay, it means if that is the case, says construction should not be done. All people are advised to live in open farms. Heavy constructions are not permitted. If that is the case, I can say BIS implemented construction or BIS standards should be followed in construction. Or BIS standards should be followed in buildings. If that is the case, I can put it in this way. What is this BIS standard? Nobody knows. Okay, we do not know, right? BIS itself, yes, stand for standards again. No problem, right? We'll just say that, okay, fine, buildings should be almost coherent with the BIS standards, right, sir? And we also know when I talk about earthquake, most of the time earthquake, we call it as a Frankenstein monster, sir. Earthquake itself do not eliminate people or it do not causes casualty. It is the man-made structure which brings the casualties of it. Right, sir. Right, BIS standard, anything else? And very importantly, the clue of answer writing can be very much taken from this side, sir. Right, sir. And just to tell you, as I was saying, NDMA is a very good source for picking up the almost points for answer writing. Right, sir. It gives you some insights, sir. What exactly you should do, what exactly you should not do. Right, as somebody suggested, they say follow BIS code relevant to your area for building standards. Right, what you said. That's what I said, it means common sense. Whatever you are suggesting, it may be there in NDMA site as such. Or anything else that you can add. Right, font is so small that you cannot copy and tell me. Anything, sir.
Create awareness.
Create awareness. Okay, sir. Create awareness. Right, sir. Awareness campaign. If that is the case, can I substitute by a better word? Can I call it as earthquake related drills? Right, conducting earthquake related drills. Right, how exactly? Right, it means people should be evacuated if at all, if this place is struck by an earthquake. We call it as a drill. Right, sir. Sometimes what happens, most of the time, drill itself becomes a disaster. Right, sir. But still, we are just conducting some drills regarding the evacuation process of earthquake. Accepted. Awareness campaigns, drills, anything else? One or two we'll just brainstorm it, and one more thing, rest all the same standard we are just going to bring in. Right, already current is not there, how to switch off, that is a question, but still. Right, okay. Again, BIS standard itself says, right, almost power should be cut, or the supply of power should be cut or disconnected immediately. That's what they say. Anything else that can be added, sir? Okay, sir. Preparedness phase, as whatever you said, BIS standard, right, drills, conducting almost, sorry, drills and what is that you said? Okay, awareness campaigns, etc. And very importantly, every point, one thing always you can add, it means vulnerability mapping. Vulnerability mapping should be done for each and every type of disaster. This is the first step what you have to follow. Because only if you know that a place is vulnerable to a particular type of a disaster, right, you can accordingly prepare yourself for the disaster. Right, sir. And anything else that can be added? Right, sir, if that is the case, impact phase, what you do? Apart from praying to God, sir, what exactly you can do for impact phase, sir? Calling for rescue team. Okay. Calling for rescue team. 2 seconds is the time which is given to you. You call for a rescue team. Right, sir. Okay. Almost put yourself. It means maximum. If at all, if you are not putting yourself in the open area, building itself will become open. Right, sir. Now try to put yourself in the place of safety and just see that almost no high tension wire is there. Because escaping from earthquake, you should not get electrocuted, sir. Right. Now anything else, stay away from glass doors, so it can, if at all, if it is shattering, it do not affects you. Right. Put yourself under a sturdy table. Right. Even in the earthquake, if at all, if there is a collapse, still there is a probability that right, your longevity is more. Right. Anything else? Again, these points, certainly speaking, penning it down is not needed. Again, I'm telling you, this is very, very common sense. Only thing is that there, you just brainstorm it, hardly 10-15 seconds, you just almost bring those points in the answer papers. And what else you can do, sir? Mobilization of rescue teams. Right. That is for post-impact assessment. Right. I'm talking about impact phase. Right, sir. And one more thing, when I talk about pre-impact phase, informations from current affairs can always be brought in. Right. There is a try almost in Uttarakhand and in Kumaon ranges of Uttarakhand, 2 places, we have this earthquake early warning system, sir. Nowadays, WhatsApp also brings that early warning system. Every day you wake up, good morning message says today you will have an earthquake. Right, sir. So we are just prepared to face an earthquake. Right. But just to tell you that this early warning system, earthquake early warning system, scientifically it is being almost implemented, it is being installed in the state of Uttarakhand. Again, going by the mechanism, how exactly it works, it is not needed, but still to add a word. When I talk about earthquake, there are two types of waves that is being produced by earthquakes, sir, if you remember. One you call it as body waves, and number two you call it as surface waves. Which is more harmful? It is surface waves. Whenever I talk about the displacement, whenever I talk about the ground shift or the disaster is resulted by surface wave. This is disastrous. Body waves are not disastrous. Body waves are harmful. Which wave strikes the ground first? It is body wave. Body wave, right, sir. So what is this complete early warning system? Is very simple. You deduct the body wave, because if I understand, from where the body waves are produced? From focus. From focus, the body waves are produced, sir. Body waves are produced, right, sir. Body waves are harmful, as we know. These are body waves. Now imagine this is the epicenter. This is the epicenter. The nearest point on the surface of the earth with respect to the focus, you call it as epicenter. Epicenter is the place where the body waves strike first. Imagine that you have a structure here, sir. You have a structure here, right, sir. You have a structure here. Now, if that is the case, if at all, if you detect a body wave, at least you will have some window period, right, where surface wave will be striking after some gap. Right, sir. If that is the case, because I know surface waves is produced from where? From where surface waves are produced, sir? From the epicenter. Epicenter is the place where surface waves are produced. Now, the entire early warning system, in the sense, first you detect a body wave. Right, sir. If that is the case, after detecting a body wave, surface wave will not reach immediately. You will have a window time after which the surface wave will be striking that particular place. Right. This time window period is used for almost evacuation or escaping mechanism, whatever it is. Right, sir. The entire early warning system is to almost mention this window period, sir. What is this window period? Can I put it this way? The time gap between body wave striking a place and surface wave striking the same place, you call it as a window period. The time gap between body wave and surface wave striking a place is called as window period. Any early warning system, the essence of early warning system is to determine this window period. If window period is more, the eventual casualties will be very, very less. When I talk about cyclones, the window period, after almost you deducting that there is a cyclone and cyclone striking a place, you have few days of time. When you talk about early warning system of tsunamis, at least 3 to 4 hours we have. If at all, if you are just detecting tsunami in the middle of the ocean, tsunami traveling at somewhere around 800 kilometers per hour, right, sir, you have 3 to 4 hours of cushioning period, or you call it as a window period. So what is this window period? You detect a disaster, and exactly when the disaster strikes that particular place, the time gap, you call it as a window period. Tsunami still it is good because you have 3 to 4 hours of window period. But earthquake, the window period is very, very less, sir. This window period may range anywhere between 1 second to 45 seconds. If it is very near to epicenter, the window period will be very less. The more the place is away from the epicenter, the window period is more. Right, sir. Right, sir. Now we are talking about earthquake. Some of the pre-impact phase, we are talking about post-impact phase. Apart from the words what is there in Disaster Management Act, right, or the steps which has to be followed in disaster management, we are not taking anything else. Right, sir. Right, these are some of the common ideas what we can have in the terms of earthquake management. Right, again I am telling you few things can be taken from disaster management site also, NDMA site also. Whatever the points what we discussed, it looked very amateur, but still these are the dictates of NDMA site, sir. It says identify a safe place indoor and outdoor under strong dining table bed, right, against an inside wall, away from the glass that could shatter around windows, mirrors, pictures, etc. Right, in the open, away from the building, trees, telephone, and very importantly electric lines, flyover and bridges. What we think is very, very amateur is the essence what has to be followed in disaster management. Right, sir. Right, sir. And a few things are also there, later part. They say one emergency kit, disaster emergency kit should be there. Right, sir. What are the essence or what are the ingredients of this disaster emergency kit, that also we'll just see. Almost entire, means every disaster the same kind of emergency kit they almost recommend, sir. Right, what exactly you should have in this emergency kit, I'll tell you, sir. Battery operated torch with extra batteries, right, no money to buy. Battery operated radio, first aid kit, manual, emergency food, dry items, biscuits, water packet sealed, candles, match, waterproof container, knife, right, etc. Gives the picture as though we are just going for a trekking, sir. But this is the emergency kit what it is suggested. You do one thing, examination, only this word you add it. Right, have a disaster emergency kit ready. Right, keep it ready and always expect a disaster to strike you. Right, sir. Not spending too much time in one particular disaster itself. Right, at least we have an idea that how exactly answer can be fabricated. Right, one, let us add 3 or 4 points in pre-impact phase. Right, sir. 1 or 2 points in post-impact phase. Right, sir. And during the impact phase, 3 or 4 points. Right. Almost all these adds to your preparedness and the mitigation practice what it can be almost followed. Right, sir. Right. Fine, sir. Earthquake, we have an idea. If that is the case, the second type of disaster also we'll just take it. This we call it as a flood, sir. We call it as a flood. Here itself we'll also talk about urban flood. Now what is a flood? Overflow of water beyond the natural levee, we call it as a flood. Or put it very simple, river water entering the adjoining plains, you call it as a flood. Right, sir. When I talk about the area, when I talk about the space, when I talk about the time, both we understood. When I talk about space, Gangetic plains and Brahmaputra plains is highly prone to flood. But again, every river, wherever you have heavy precipitation coming into act, there all it is prone to floods. But still, specifically we have taken 2 names, Gangetic rivers. Every Gangetic rivers, they flood during the monsoonal time. Right, so similarly, when I talk about Brahmaputra, every year Brahmaputra floods. Even means very recently also Brahmaputra is flooding. Right, sir. Area wise we have taken, time wise also we have taken. When I talk about the temporal sequence of flood, 2 months are known for flood in India. Right, sir. One we have taken in the month of July and we have taken in the month of August. Right, sir. We know some aspects of flood. Now let me talk about mitigation, sir. Mitigation, 3 or 4 points if you add, once our confidence is means at least built, we'll go for the next, sir. Right. Similarly, when I talk about the pre-impact phase, post-impact phase and impact phase, what are the different things you can have, sir? Pre-impact, post-impact, and of course 2 or 4 points during impact phase. Pre-impact phase, sir. Sorry, proper drainage system. Okay, fine. Proper drainage system. Early warning system. Okay, fine. Early warning system, everything, any disaster, you can always apply early warning system. Right, sir. Early warning, taken it. No denial about it. I cannot deny any point. That is the actual understanding what I have here. Right, sir. Anything else? Fantastic. Right. A strengthening of river banks, I can call it as, right, or I mean strengthening the natural levees. Fantastic, sir. That's a very valid point. It is called as a desiltation. Whenever I talk about a proper drainage, when I talk about a proper drainage, we understand that desiltation is the one which checks the bottlenecks in the flow. See, what is a bottleneck? It means the almost the smallest passage in the river, we call it as a bottleneck. Bottleneck is the one which almost determines the entire flow in a river system. So bottlenecks should be cleared. Right? Bottlenecks is generally cleared by desiltation, sir. Right, you add it as a point, desiltation. Anything else that can be added, sir? Sorrow of Bengal. Once a sorrow of Bengal, now it is not a sorrow. Damodar. How exactly the flood in Damodar was mitigated? Dams, construction of dam. Right, if you are very rational, I can go for check dams. Because nowadays dam itself, construction of a dam itself is a negative term. Right, if that is the case, I can go for distribution or localized pattern of dam construction. Right, sir, you call it as a check dam. Instead of going for one large dam, I can go for distributed storage of water in the name of check dams. Right, sir, very good. Some 5-6 points we have added it. Right, sir. Impact phase, rescue, everything you can add it. Post impact phase also 3 or 4 points you can add it. Certainly speaking, I am not adding it. Right, NDMA site itself is there and the material what we have is having it. So let us not waste too much of time. Right, sir. Now, since we are talking about flood, we will also talk about a very recent phenomena, what we call it as urban flood, sir. Now, I said very recently this concept called as urban flood is almost inducted, sir. If that is the case, at least now we have two concepts. One we call it as a flood versus urban flood. Though this depiction is not exactly right, but still for understanding, let me say, if at all if I am talking about flood, let me consider it is in the rural areas. Right, as the name itself suggests, another type of flood it is there in urban areas, though this is not the clear almost explanation of the same, but still for our understanding I am just taking in this fashion. Now, what is a flood we know? What exactly? Technically speaking, what is a flood we know? Otherwise, layman's understanding, the rise of water, right, in almost a plain region, you call it as a flood. Right, inundation of water in an area, you call it as a flood. Now, I am taking a situation, sir, one rural versus urban setup. Imagine both the places we have similar type of precipitation. Similar type, that can be, for example, some centimeters of precipitation in a particular area. For example, let me say somewhere around 5 centimeters in 1 hour. Right, sir, both rural area and urban area, both are receiving similar type of precipitation distribution. But idea says, when I talk about urban flood, the degree of urban flooding is 6 times more than that of rural flood, sir. For example, again, layman's understanding, if at all, if I have 5 centimeters in 1 hour, this is purely example, purely an example, utopian example, right, sir. If at all, if this precipitation raises 10 centimeter of water, right, my understanding says in urban areas, what will be the rise of water in the land? It will be somewhere around 60 centimeters. This is the easiest way of understanding what is this urban flood. Same precipitation in 2 different areas, the degree of flooding will differ. Statistics says urban areas, the degree of flooding is at least 6 times more than that of the rural areas. Right, sir. If that is the case, very recently I can also talk about Mumbai floods. Right, sir, very recently, because Mumbai is almost preparing itself for almost facing the effect of monsoon. Right, sir. So not only Mumbai, right. If I talk about 2015 and 16, Chennai was the finest example. Right, 17 early 17 Hyderabad was an example. Right, even few cities in Rajasthan it became an example where it is known for its urban flooding. Right, sir. Even few places where river is not there, flooding was happening. Right, sir. Now, what is the difference between flood, normal flood and urban flood? We have an understanding. Urban areas, the degree of flooding is normally 6 times higher than the rural flooding. That is the understanding. Now come the question, very popular questions, always comes from everybody's mouth. It is called as why. Right, sir. Why urban flooding?
Water percolation.
Very good, sir. This why is very, very important. You call it as a causes. Let me call it as causes. What causes urban flooding?
Water.
One, absence of percolation. As somebody said. Now, for that I should understand, see, every river is called as a drainage system. What is drainage? It drains the water. It drains the surface water, you call it as a drainage. Right. If that is the case, if at all, if I have a surface water, sir, if I have a surface water, imagine this is a surface water. Right. If you have a surface water, what are the different ways that this surface water is normally lost? Evaporation, sir. The most commonest one, evaporation. Apart from evaporation, you also have the surface runoff. Surface runoff, very popularly you called as drainage. The third aspect, you call it as a layman's term, you call it as a seepage. Sometimes you call it as percolation. You call it as a seepage or you call it as a percolation. These are the 3 ways how water is normally lost naturally. Right, so not naturally lost. Evaporation, surface runoff and percolation. Right, sir. Evaporation is almost common. Being tropical in nature, almost the rate of evaporation is almost common everywhere. But only thing is that the coastal areas evaporation is limited. Inland areas evaporation is more. Reason? Humidity. The presence of water vapor which is already there in the atmosphere or the sample air mass is what we have. Right, sir. Coastal area evaporation is very, very less when I am comparing to the inland areas. Right, sir. Now, what restricts or what the loss or the means the loss of water, what is restricted in the urban area is this percolation. Right. What restricts the percolation? I said absence of percolation. What can be the potential reason for it? Completely, you say metal roads. Fine, okay. Metal roads, cemented pavements, etc. can be the reason for this near absence of percolation. Almost we do not have places where there is a direct exposure of the soil as such. Very, very limited is the exposure of soil. Right, sir. Apart from absence of percolation, anything else that can be added? Okay, sir. Absence of percolation. You can also add some other point, as somebody said, trespassing wetlands. Trespass of wetlands. Again, you can say trespassing of stormwater drain. Trespassing of stormwater drain, or you call it as drainage itself. See, whenever I say trespassing, in the sense that these are the encroachment I am talking about. Encroachment of wetlands, right? Encroachment of the normal drains during the surplus water, if at all, if you have a surplus water and so on. Right? Anything else that can be added, sir? I think these 3 or 4 points can be almost trespassing. Okay, if you want to add one more point with the same meaning, you can write it as illegal construction. Right, sir. Now, causes we have taken it. If that is the case, we also have the remedies for it. Right. If that is the case, if at all, if you are just going to mitigate the urban flood, what can be the means, at least steps, what you will take it for mitigation? If you know the cause, removal of the cause itself can be the cure as such. Right, sir. If that is the case, absence of percolation, what exactly we may do to increase percolation? Right, one, you can go for rainwater harvesting. Right, increase more arable land, or at least those exposed land, right, in the urban areas. Increase urban forestry. Right, almost we can go for almost pavements which can help in percolation also, not completely cemented, but those pavements blocks with almost some openings which can facilitate percolation. Right, sir. And one more thing, removal of illegal encroachment in the wetlands and removal of the same in stormwater drain and drainage, that can also be added. No new points is added. I am just telling you that whatever cause we have identified, rectification of the cause, the same thing we are taking it as a remedial measure, sir. Right. Both the types of flood we have discussed. Urban flood also, we have an idea how significantly urban flood is different from the rural flood. Right, sir. With this, we'll also talk about another type of disaster. This disaster is called as drought, sir. This disaster is called as a drought. Now we'll understand what is a drought. Technically, all disaster, we know what exactly is that disaster. Now we'll understand what is this drought. Name, going by the name, what exactly this drought may suggest us? Non-availability of water, as simple as this. Right. There are many definitions of a drought. I'm just telling you that what are the different types of drought what we have, but only one thing we are going to take it. Right. If that is the case, what exactly Ministry of Agriculture has defined a drought, that is going to be our definition. Right. Before taking that definition, we'll see what are the different types of drought that is there in India. Right. According to National Commission on Agriculture, sir, it has almost given 3 types of drought. One, they call it as a meteorological drought. Number 2, it is called as agricultural drought. And the third, it is called as hydrological drought. These are the 3 types of drought what is given by National Commission on Agriculture. Only the name you take it. The details is not needed for us, at least superficially we'll just take what can be the details. Now, what is this meteorological drought, we'll say. A meteorological drought is a situation where there is a significant decrease from the normal precipitation over an area that is by more than 10%. Put it very simple. If an area receives less than 90% of normal rain, you call it as meteorological drought. Going by example, I am at some place, the average rainfall in that season, say 100 centimeter. This place receives only 89 centimeter or 88 centimeter, you call it as the meteorological drought. Any place which receives less than 90% of normal precipitation, you call it as a meteorological drought. Right, sir. Now when I talk about the second type of drought, it's called as hydrological drought. It's called as hydrological drought. Right, sir. Now this is the one whenever this meteorological drought prolongs itself. If meteorological drought completely prolongs, or I put it this way, it means there is a continuous sequence of meteorological drought. What happens? Subsurface water, surface water, etc. will start depleting, sir. If at all, if there is a situation where depletion of surface and subsurface water happens, this situation you call it as hydrological drought. And finally, when I talk about agricultural drought, if at all, if you have persistent hydrological drought, the practice of agriculture itself becomes a failure, sir. If at all, if the rainfall is inadequate to support healthy crop, this situation you call it as agricultural drought. Not able to practice agriculture because of lack of means water, you call it as agricultural drought. This definition is not important for us. Right. Just to tell you that there are three types of droughts mentioned by National Commission on Agriculture. Right. Meteorological drought where rainfall is less than 90 centimeters. Hydrological drought where the availability of surface and subsurface water depletes. Agricultural drought is a situation where the practice of agriculture becomes not means at least almost it is not feasible. Right, sir. Now, what may be important for us is the definition given by IMD, sir. Right. IMD almost it declares a different types of drought situations, sir. One, it talks about a drought week. What is a drought week? We will understand. If at all, if the rainfall in a week is less than half of its normal amount. What is this half of this normal amount? If at all, if a 1 week a place experience less than 50% of normal, you call it as a drought week. You call it as a drought week. Again, going by examples, if a place experience or if a place receives 10 centimeters of precipitation in 1 week, right? If the same place receives less than 5 centimeters, you call it as a drought week, right, sir? So less than half of its normal precipitation or amount, you call it as a drought week. What is very, very important is this definition. The second definition. Right. Whenever we say drought in India, it is not just drought, it is agricultural drought, which is given by IMD, sir. Not by National Commission on Agriculture, it is given by IMD. So whenever I say drought, I am talking about this particular definition called as agricultural drought given by IMD, Indian Meteorological Department. Right, sir. According to IMD's classification, whenever a place experiences 4 consecutive drought week, right, and very importantly, right, during June to September period. What is the June to September period? Monsoon. It means drought is a situation. What is the temporal or what is the time when we experience a drought? It is the same monsoon period, because definition itself says whenever a place receives less than half of the normal precipitation for 4 consecutive weeks, make it simple, 4 consecutive weeks, approximately a month. Right. If any place receives less than half of its precipitation for 1 continuous month, you call it as an agricultural drought. You call it as an agricultural drought, or in general, this is a situation what we address it as a drought. Now, what is very interesting in the sense, what is the time we experience flood? The same time when we experience the drought also. Flood and drought coexist in India. Right, sir. Sometimes what happens? One place may experience a drought, another place may experience a flood in the same time. Or we also have another situation, the same place experience almost one phase it experience a flood, the next spell it experience a drought, another spell it may experience a drought. Finest example, Chennai itself. Right, sir. Almost when I talk about Chennai, it means we had 6 months drought-like condition followed by flood, again drought followed by flood. Right, sir. This again we call it as an abnormal phenomena. Right. Scholars have called this as a new normal as such. They have called it as a new normal. Now, what is this new normal, particularly with drought and flood? When drought and flood coexist almost in the similar location, you call it as a new normal. See, what is this new normal? What is normal? Which happens every year, right? You call it as a new normal. Almost the same rhythmic type of a pattern is followed. You call it as a normal, right, sir? What is new normal? If this normal itself is abnormal, you call it as a new normal, right? Being abnormal is becoming normal. That is new normal, right? Again, finest example, preliminary examination, right? It is becoming, it means you cannot predict this particular, for example, 2018 paper is almost unique. We do not have any relevance with 2017. Again, 2019 may not have the same relevance, right? We call it as a new normal. Abnormal becoming normal, you call it as a new normal, sir. This is another new term that is there in news, and means most of the papers, they bring this word called as new normal. Right, sir. Other definitions, we are not going into detail of other definition. We understood what is a drought week. If at all, if I talk about a drought, what is a drought? 4 continuous drought week, you call it as a drought. You call it as an agricultural drought. In India, this agricultural drought is regarded as drought itself. Right, sir. Right. Fine, sir. Again, when I talk about drought resistant mechanism, drought mitigation, few points that can be added. When I talk about a drought, when I talk about mitigation, or when I talk about preparedness, impact, post-impact, whatever it is, sir, whatever it is. What are the points that can be added, sir? Few points. Sorry? Have sufficient water resource. Borrow from Arabian Sea and Bay of Bengal. Water harvesting. Okay, fine. Rainwater harvesting. Rainwater harvesting. Anything else that can be added? Preservation of natural reservoirs. Okay, fine. Preservation. Okay, preservation of natural reservoir, taken it without writing it. Anything else? Sorry? Timely declaration of drought, accepted. Declaration of drought. See, declaration of drought, more than disaster management, it is political. Because once a place is declared as a drought, the fund will be released immediately. Right, sir. Whether it is reaching the farmer, we do not know. Right. But still, sir, two things we have seen. One, when I talk about a new normal in weather pattern, right, very interestingly, we have seen drought and flood coexisting. If that is the case, whether it is feasible or not, my aim is to get 1 mark out of this point. Always you can have it. Interlinking of rivers, sir. Certainly speaking, nobody knows whether it is feasible or not, or the cost what you are just almost investing in interlinking of river, nobody knows, because the topography in India in such a way that it means northern you have a plains, again we have a plateau elevated region, and southern you have a plain. It means you have to pump the water from Ganges to the elevated region, again you have this water descending along the plateau region. Not possible. Not possible. Certainly speaking, not possible. Tunnels, right? You can have tunnels, right? Or the easiest way is to connect these rivers via Bay of Bengal and Arabian Sea. That is very, very easy. Right, sir? Now, right. What I am saying is very simple, right? This point will be there or it can be there because for the simple reason both these disaster happens in the similar time. or same time, interlinking of rivers, sir. Anything else? This is universal point, sir. Anything they ask, right, you can have this point. And we also have one more point which can be substituted in any situation. Afforestation. Landslide, how you mitigate afforestation? Right, sir. Sometimes earthquake also you add it. Nobody is going to deny it. Right, sir. Universal points, this can be added. Nobody can deny it. That's what I'm saying. Anything else, sir? Reducing? Fine, okay. It means drought proofing or drought resistant agricultural practice. Add it in your own point. Anything else can be added, sir. And again, one more universal point. You said reservoirs, again, the positive aspect of it, check dams. Fine. Etc. You can have your own words filling it. Right, some of the ideas we are just throwing it. Now what is a drought? We have an idea. Some of the mitigation practices of the drought, that also we have an idea. Right, sir. Fine. Now some of the explicitly mentioned topics we have taken it. Right. At least we have an idea what is what and so on, sir. Now, earthquake we had an idea, flood we have taken it, a landslide. Okay, we'll discuss. Cyclone we will not discuss, tsunami we will not discuss, urban flood we have discussed, heat wave and drought we have discussed. Right, sir. Now other things, what is what, we'll just take it, sir. There is a concept called as heat wave. Only the definition we'll just go to. What exactly is a heat wave? Right. Persistence, or it means continuous presence or persistent presence of high temperature prevailing in a place. You call it as a heat wave situation. Right, sir. Now, whenever I talk about it, means two things. When a localized place experience the presence of high temperature for a stipulated time, you call it as a heat wave like situation. Everywhere heat wave like situation is possible, not only in plains, even in mountainous region it is possible. Right. When I talk about two places, when I talk about plains, if the temperature is continuously more than 40 degrees centigrade, sir. If it is more than 40 degrees centigrade, this is a situation which results in heat wave. Similarly, when I talk about mountains, if the temperature is consistently higher than 30 degrees centigrade, this situation you call it as a heat wave like situation. It means not only plains, mountain is also prone to this heat wave like situations. Right, sir. Normally, when I talk about the place, forget it. Everywhere heat wave is possible. Coastal areas, technically speaking, it should not be prevalent. Right, prevalent, but still the impact will be very, very less in coastal areas. Right. Now, when I talk about the time, when exactly this heat wave may be prevalent in India? Right, sir. I put it this way. When I talk about seasons in India, there are 4 seasons in India, sir. What are the seasons? Spring, summer, autumn and winter. That is not with India. Right. When I talk about India, we have a season called as dry winters, dry summers, advancing monsoon and retreating monsoon. Retreating monsoon, right, flood-like situation in the Coromandel coast. Advancing monsoon, you have both drought and flood-like situation in entire India. Now when I talk about this dry summers, month you can adopt it. When I talk about dry summers, what can be the month? Right, if you are not precise, at least 2 months you can add it, April and May. It is 15th March to 15th June. This is the place or this is the time when we call it as a dry summers. But at least these 2 months, April and May, you can regard it as a dry summer period. Right, sir. Cyclones and tsunamis, I am just leaving it. Lastly, we'll just talk about landslide also, sir. Mitigation. Buy one inverter AC and sit inside your house, sir. Right. Now, finally coming to landslide. Yes, boss. Afternoon time. Afternoon time. That's a silly question here. Right. Okay. Finally, when I talk about landslide, what is a landslide? We have an understanding, boss. Right. The mass wasting or the gravity shift of the weathered material along the slope of the mountain, you call it as a landslide. Two areas we have identified with the landslide. One, entire Himalayan region and the western side of Western Ghats we have identified with the landslide. What time your class ends? 3:30, right? Right, sir. Now, directly we'll talk about the causes we know, sir. Only mitigation, let me talk about mitigation. 3 or 4 points let me add with the landslide. What can be the mitigation, sir? Only if mountains are there, you will be having landslide. Remove the mountain. Right, sir. M sand. Right. That is one thing which is bothering nowadays, where mountains are almost being removed. But okay, forget about it. Right. Mitigation of landslide. What can be the potential mitigations of landslide? Okay, fine. Okay. Avoid constructions on landslide prone regions. Avoid, instead of avoiding, you can always use this word called as regulation. Regulation of construction. Regulation of construction along the slopes of a mountain. Anything else, sir? Sorry? Okay, fine, very good. You call it as retention walls. Even if landslide happens, slowly, steadily, you have number of retention walls where the mass wasted material will be restricted along the slope of the mountain. You call it as retention walls. Anything else, sir? You can add a few points like, very good, universal point, afforestation. Don't bring interlinking of river here. Right. Afforestation, sir. Certainly speaking, it helps, sir. Right. Apart from that, you can have a pile construction. You can have buttress. Almost these are pillars which is almost constructed so deep so that it will strengthen the so-called retention wall. You also have a technique of anchorage. Giving few points, we also have a small techniques where you call it as a beep holes. Beep holes, very small holes which is almost constructed along a retention walls, so that only water is almost discharged without the slippage or the movement of soil as such. We call it as a beep holes. Right, sir, these are some of the techniques, 3 or 4 points, okay, 6 points we have added from outside. More points you please add it from your side, sir. Right. And finally, few things what is there in news, sir, that also we'll just take it. Right, sir, 2 things I'm just taking it. One, about a natural phenomena called as lightning, sir. Lightning. Very interestingly, National Crime Record Bureau is an agency which almost has a statistics. They have a statistics and they'll be noting all the unnatural death what is happening in India. So that is the reason the statistics lies with the National Crime Record Bureau as such. Now, according to the statistics what is there in NCRB, right, one thing which came as a shocker or a surprise. The number of casualties or a death what has occurred post 2005 till today, one incident which has caused the highest number of death, right, it's this lightning, sir. Lightning, not earthquake, not flood, not heat waves, etc. It is lightning. But lightning is not regarded as a disaster. Every year we have at least 2000 death, lightning related deaths. Just to tell you that among all unnatural death, more than 10%, statistics says 12% of unnatural death is accounted by this lightning as a phenomenon. One single day, sir, 2016, we have lost 93 people across few states, Bihar, Jharkhand, Uttar Pradesh, Orissa, etc. Sorry, Madhya Pradesh, etc. Right, sir. And why 2016? When I talk about very recent data, April 2018, sir, April 2018, we had at least 36,749 lightning struck only the state of Andhra Pradesh, right, in the limited span of 13 hours. 13 hours. We lost 9 lives on that particular date. It means April 2018, the recent one I am just talking about. Right, sir. And this rate at which lightning strikes is very, very unusual, sir. Right. It is a result of extreme weather pattern. It is highly unusual. It is highly unusual. Right. From 2016 itself, there is one question. The question, very popular question, and this question asks whether lightning has to be regarded as a disaster or not. See, there are few advantages, if at all, if you are just declaring a phenomena as a disaster. Right. Primary objective for declaration is the fund which is available. Right. Fund in the sense for preparedness phase and post-impact phase, you will be using this fund. Right, sir. Number 2, you will be having, right, almost you will be following the international coordination will also be there. Post signing the Sendai framework, we have this international cooperation for answering any disaster related activities. Right, sir. So these are the some of the advantages we will be having once a phenomena is declared as a disaster as such. Right, sir. Now, as I was saying, this is one comparison what we have taken. The statistics says from 2004, the single largest event which has caused the unnatural death is lightning, sir. At least every year we have more than 2000 lightning related casualties. Right, sir. And just to tell you that some of the safety steps, if at all, if lightning is striking, these are the things what it can be followed, sir. Right. Seek shelter inside a large building or a car. Copy paste. Okay. Get out of wide open space and away from exposed hilltops. If you are nowhere near to the shelter, make yourself as a small target. Already we are small. Right. Do not shelter beneath tall or isolated tree. If you are on water, get to the shore and almost move quickly away from the water. Just to tell you that these are some of the things, right, what you should do whenever you experience large number of lightning strikes a particular place. Right, sir. And when I talk about the places where lightning generally strikes, 2 places are marked in India. Right, sir. Again, one, you are there in Assam, sir. Assam is one place where majority of lightning strikes, followed by West Bengal, Orissa, Jharkhand, or almost majority of eastern coast. Right, so these are the places which is known for lightning. Along with this eastern coast with Assam, you also have in the state of Kerala. Right, these are the places where lightning strikes maximum. What is the logic of identifying these places? These are some of the places which receives the maximum rainfall during southwest monsoon. Right, sir. And one more thing, whenever I talk about lightning, lightning is always associated with the nimbus clouds. When I talk about a thunderstorm, lightning, that sound you call it as a thunderstorm. Thunderstorm is always associated with the cumulonimbus clouds. So wherever you have the possibility of having a cumulonimbus cloud, or nimbus cloud in general, you have the possibility of having a, or almost lightning striking a place is also possible. Right, sir. And finally, the very recent dust storm what we had, May month. Generally, again talking about this season, we have different seasons in India. There is one season called as dry summers. This dry summer is the period which is normally known for a local wind mechanism called as Lu. What is this Lu? Lu is a dusty wind which is sourced from Rajasthan. Right, sir. It's a wind. Why exactly deflates or almost get deflated very easily? Reason, the moisture content in the air will be very, very less. Right. If the moisture content in the air is less, certainly speaking, the soil moisture holding less. If that is the case, weight of the soil will be very less. It can be very easily deflated. Right, sir. So that is the reason. What is very important is dry. Dry is the condition which makes the sand to get deflated. Low, very common phenomenon. But what is not common, again reiterating this word called as new normal, the intensity with which Lu is striking nowadays. Right, when I talk about the last month, more than 125 lives we have lost. Right, that is the reason this wind, we name it as Lu. Right, instead of calling it as a Lu, we just called it as 2018 dust storms. Two states, they got very severely affected. When I talk about Uttar Pradesh, Agra in Uttar Pradesh and Alwar in Rajasthan, they are really affected by this dust storms. Dust storm. Right, sir. Just to tell you that more than 125 lives we have lost. Right. Again, reiterating this point, though it is common, the magnitude of the recent dust storm is not common. This can also be noted again as a new normal in weather pattern. We can note it, sir. Right, disaster management policy of 2019, I am just skipping it. Right, coming to the end, see what we have seen so far is the different types of disaster what is declared or classified in India. The areas which gets affected or it is vulnerable to this disaster, some of the basic mitigation techniques practiced in handling these disasters we have seen. Right, sir. While handling, or when I talk about the mitigation technique, the basic principle what we are taking is the dictates of National Disaster Management Act and the respective policies what we had. Right, sir. 8 almost the cyclical steps we have taken it. Right, sir. The same 8 cyclical steps we may answer it for all the types of disaster. Right. To put it as a point, again I am telling you, the rate at which you can predict in this particular area is very, very simple. Know about the disaster. Right. Know about the basic dictates of NDMA's right, disaster guidelines what they have given for each and every individual type of a disaster, and few cases you also look for current related informations. Right, current related information. This is not the right time to take these topics. We'll wait till the end of August. From where almost the beginning of September your question paper will be ready, sir. Question paper will be ready. See, whether you are writing mains examination this year or not, one thing you can do it. See, if you are writing this year, I am happy. If you are not writing this year, I am very, very happy, sir. Right. Reason is very simple. What you can do in the sense, you have one chance for experimenting it. Right. You prepare for disaster management, not for disaster management. You prepare for any topic which is given in mains examination. Right. Understand the syllabus first, decode the syllabus first. Right. You yourself make a mental makeup that what type of question may come. Right. How to have an idea. You are analyzing the past year's question. Right. Which area is being concentrated, the same area I am also giving concentration. And if at all, if any new development comes in the newspaper, I am just taking it. Just see whether your prediction works in the paper or not. Just see it. Right. Only thing is that your people who are not examination, you also write or at least prepare for mains exam. Only thing is that 1 day of difference, not even 1 day, 3 hours of difference will be there. Not, see, every person may not get attempt or success in very first attempt itself, sir. People who are getting service in very first attempt, I pity for them, right? Because they have not enjoyed their, right? They have not seen what is youthhood, right? 1 or 2 attempts or more you take it, persistence or consistency in this preparation will certainly help you. Right? Always get more, right? Result is the eventual thing what is rewarded at the end of your preparation, sir. Right? That is not ultimate in itself, right? Preparing, right? Believe UPSC, start loving UPSC also, right? Love will not betray you, sir, right? At least with the UPSC, right? Fine. So this will end the class, sir. Thank you.